shoot you an email with the sign-in sheet quickly, okay?
Very good. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Allison McKenzie and I am Chair of the Historic Conservation Board. I would like to take a minute to remind everyone about the rules of this proceeding. This proceeding is at all times governed by the rules of procedure adopted by the board on September 26th, 2011, amended March 23rd, 2015, last amended March 9th, 2020. A copy of the rules of procedure is available for review online. For those planning to testify today, which does not include those solely making arguments such as attorneys, should stand and take an oath administered by the board's attorney. This is a quasi-judicial hearing. As such, the board reserves the right to deliberate in private. The Ohio Rules of Evidence do not apply to this hearing. However, professional rules of conduct do apply, and candor to the tribunal is required. The board members are citizen volunteers and are not paid for their service. They are treated as public officials under Ohio law. Any attempt to influence them, including but not limited to bribery, intimidation, retaliation, which may include contacting their employer in an attempt to exert influence, is punishable as a crime. All should be aware that this meeting is being recorded. Therefore, please speak clearly into your microphone and state your name and address for the record. In the event of any technical difficulties with the video conferencing technology, I may continue or postpone this hearing at my discretion. All participants providing testimony must have both camera and audio features turned on in order to participate. With that said, let's proceed with the first item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is an application for a certificate of appropriateness for 2200 Auburn Avenue, which is located in the Mount Auburn Historic District. The applicant is proposing the rehabilitation of the building. Currently, it is a mixed-use building with 2 commercial spaces on the ground floor and 9 apartment buildings on the upper levels. So the applicant is proposing to convert the entire building to residential. That would involve adding 3 residential units to the ground floor space that is currently commercial. In conjunction with that conversion, the exterior work on the building will include general repair to the building, as well as replacing certain windows throughout the facade with new windows that are proposed to be a Pella Reserve traditional aluminum clad wood window. And then additionally, there are 3 existing small window openings that are located on the upper portion of the ground floor that the applicant is proposing to enlarge downward in order to create regular sized windows that could also act as egress windows for that residential space in that location. So the proposal meets all of the zoning requirements, so there is no zoning relief needed for this project. So this is strictly a COA review, primarily for those new windows that will be installed, as well as enlarging those 3 openings. So staff feels that the proposed Pella windows that are proposed for the replacements do meet the historic conservation standards. This is a window that has not been reviewed in the past that I was able to identify. It's not included on our current list of pre-approved windows. So this is a new window type, as far as I know, that the board has not seen before. So staff did review the specs for the windows and does believe that they are an appropriate replacement, as they have compatible dimensions to a historic window. So staff does recommend approval of those replacement windows, and staff also feels that the enlargement of those windows on the side elevation is also appropriate, considering the needed additional light for the residential space on that ground floor location. Since they are not on the primary facade along Auburn Avenue, but are on a side elevation that will still have visibility because it's a corner lot. But at this location, it will not have as big of an impact as it would if windows on that primary facade were being altered. So staff does feel that the proposed work is appropriate in the interest of historic conservation, and staff recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness for 2200 Auburn Avenue per plans by RDA Group Architects dated 9/13/2022, including any revisions submitted for permit subject to staff review and approval with the following conditions: that the building permits must be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you. It looks like we do have an applicant and an owner rep signed up. If either of you would like to add anything, let's get you sworn in.
Is that Mr. Snyder?
That's correct.
Mr. Snyder, if you could raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. What would you like to tell us?
See here, I appreciate the time to review this. Again, we've been done this work trying to conform to the extent possible with the Historic Review Conservation Board requirements. I think what we're proposing on the first floor there is in keeping with the style of the rest of the building. So I appreciate your consideration of this, and the staff. Hopefully you follow the staff recommendation. So thank you.
Do we have a Mr. Schimberg?
I don't see him here.
Not either. He's on my list. Okay. Well, with that, are there any questions from the board for the applicant or staff? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the certificate of appropriateness as laid out by staff.
Second.
Thank you. I'll call the roll. Ms. Smith-Dobbins,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Zalesko,
Yes.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Mr. Young.
Yes.
The chair votes aye. Thank you very much. Looks like you're good to go.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, on to item number 2. So this is an application for a certificate of appropriateness and zoning relief for the property at 242 West McMicken Avenue in the Soane Mohawk Historic District. This project was before you previously a few weeks ago in order to receive a conditional use approval to convert the existing building from its previous warehousing use to a brewery as a general production industry. So in the UM, that requires conditional use approval, which was granted by the board on October 24th, 2022. That process also included approval of accessory structures in the side yard for a CO2 tank and a chiller, as well as new enlarged window openings on a portion of the building. So that work has been approved, and the applicant has continued to move forward on their plans for the larger project. So they are currently coming to the board for approval, excuse me, for the installation of a new fermenting tank addition on the side of the building. So this will be in the same location that was previously approved for the CO2 tank and the chiller unit. The applicant's proposing to place these 16 fermenter tanks in that same area, which will require the removal of the existing stone retaining wall and the installation of 2 new retaining walls to clear the space needed for those fermenters. The applicant is also proposing on the site plan an 8-space parking pad along Mohawk Street, which currently, as it's proposed, would require a special exception to eliminate the 3-foot landscape buffer surrounding that parking area. Since the staff report was completed and submitted to the HCB, we have had conversations with the Department of Transportation and Engineering regarding that parking lot. And DOTE has stated that they are not able to approve the parking lot in its current configuration due to the width of the required curb cut, as well as the configuration of that parking area with pulling in and backing out required directly onto Mohawk Street. So as DOTE will not be able to support the parking pad as it's currently proposed, that will need to be reworked. So staff is recommending at this point that the current review be limited to the addition for the fermenting tanks, and the applicant will have to rework the parking area. And assuming that that can be done without requiring any additional zoning relief, parking areas are something that are generally approvable at the staff level. So staff would recommend removing that parking pad from consideration on the current proposal and allowing staff to review that when it is ultimately reconfigured. So that being said, regarding the fermenting tank addition, the applicant is proposing these tanks on the side of the building, which I should mention is technically outside the boundary of the historic district, but it is attached to the building and on the same parcel as the building that is within the district. So based on past precedent, when that is the case, we have reviewed any work outside those boundaries if they are on the same parcel or on the same building. So the COA is still required for the addition to the building. So staff feels that the addition is generally appropriate to this building in the interest of historic preservation, as it is being used for an expansion of the existing brewing facilities that is required for the operator to complete their full plans for the property. The owner did investigate other locations for the fermenting tanks, but it was found that it was not possible to place them on the interior of the building due to their size and the floor area that's required to house these tanks, as the interior space is needed for the production facilities for the brewery. So the exterior is the most viable location for these tanks. The retaining wall that's currently on the property will be removed, and the stone from that retaining wall will be reused in the installation of the new wall. It will be used as the cladding material. The wall itself is proposed to be concrete, and the brick will be placed on the outside facade of that wall along the McMicken frontage in order to not have an exposed concrete wall fronting that street within that district. So the first retaining wall will be built at the existing grade level along McMicken, and the 16 fermenting tanks will be placed atop that wall. A second retaining wall will be placed to the rear of those tanks along the Mohawk Street frontage, and that will be basically behind those tanks, primarily below grade from the Mohawk Street frontage. The top of that wall will extend slightly above the grade on Mohawk, and that area will also be faced with stone fronting Mohawk. So being an industrial building used for general production industry, staff feels that generally this addition is appropriate. It is they are galvanized steel fermenting tanks that will be visible from both McMillan and Mohawk Street. There will be a black metal picket fence installed both on the Mohawk and the McMillan frontages to help screen those somewhat, but due to their size, they will be, it will be a fairly large structure when viewed from the street. So staff had also explored other options for the placement of this in order to retain the existing retaining wall, as well as moving those tanks further from the Mohawk frontage But the most likely scenario in that instance would be to place them out in the parking lot in front of the retaining wall on that site, which would push those tanks up against the McMillan frontage, which would make them much more prominent on the streetscape. Excuse me. And that location would also partially block the views of the historic building when viewing up McMillan Street. So generally, staff does feel that the proposed location is the most appropriate location for these tanks. And the applicant is doing what they can on the site to help soften the appearance of those tanks by reutilizing that historic stone on the retaining wall and installing the 6-foot black metal fencing in the front and behind those. So I would also note that we did receive some concerns from a resident on Mohawk Street regarding the views that would be present from Mohawk with the installation of these fermenting tanks. And while that is a valid concern and the tanks will be visible from Mohawk, being placed on top of the lower retaining wall, that will raise the level of the tanks to the same level as the roof of the existing structure. So while on McMicken, that's about 3 stories tall, the view from Mohawk, because the grade does drop off significantly, it will be about 1 story in height when viewed from Mohawk Street. So staff does recommend approval of the conditional use that is required for a general production use at 242 West McMicken Avenue. And staff also recommends approval of the certificate of appropriateness for 242 West McMicken Avenue, including any revisions submitted for permit subject to staff review and approval with the condition that the building permits be issued within 2 years of the decision date or the COA shall expire.
Thank you. It does look like we have 2 applicants from the architect's office, as well as 2 participants from Sugar Creek. If any of you would like to add to the conversation, let's get you sworn in, please.
Mr. Stahura and Mr. Novak, did you all want to add anything?
Yes, please.
Okay, if you could each raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do, yes.
Great, please continue.
Well, thank you. I just wanted to say, I think Doug gave a good overview of the effort that was taken by the client to position the structure as minimally on the site as possible. And we felt that extending kind of the massing of the 242 West McMicken building towards the east and keeping the roof line would be the kind of least visually intrusive path. And client has made an attempt to screen the structure. We got to this position due to some site constraints and working around those, but I think that this is kind of the optimal solution.
Thank you. Anything else?
That's all. Thank you.
Would anyone from Sugar Creek like to speak?
I think we just have Mr. Gillis here. Mr. Gillis, if you could unmute just briefly. Is there anything you want to add?
No, sir.
Okay, we do have a couple neighbors signed up, but before that, are there any questions from the board for either staff or the applicants?
Yeah, Madam Chair, I do have a question. Mr. Owen, you've done a great job here. In your request for some future latitude in approving what comes back after they adjust the site, is that limited to the configuration of where the tanks are now? Or you see where I'm going with this?
So
If they
the,
can't get the parking to work, are the tanks gonna encroach into what's being designated as parking area now, or, you know, because I kind of like to see that come back to the board, if that's the case.
so I don't know that the configuration has been determined yet for what the new parking layout will be. I don't believe that the location of the tanks is going to change based on, you know, where that new parking is going to be configured, but you know, that may be a better question for the applicant. But you know, it's not my intention to approve any changes to the locations of those tanks themselves. I was mainly just looking at how that parking area could be reconfigured along Mohawk if that is placed along Mohawk in a configuration that DOTE is able to approve. That is something that would typically be able to be approved at the staff level.
Sure, good. I think that's appropriate. I do. Thank you.
Any other questions for applicants or staff at this time? Okay, if not, we'll go into the neighbors that we have signed up. Danny Dellinger. You would unmute and we'll get you sworn in.
You could raise your right hand, Mr. Dellinger. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay, please proceed with what you'd like to tell us.
Well, I have no issue with the tanks or the placement of the tanks or concerns about the view. My only concern is about parking and circulation on Mohawk Street. And I hope you had a chance to review the email that I sent that highlighted that Mohawk Street is primarily a residential street on the north side of the street. Almost all of the other uses are residential uses. The pavement is currently too narrow to permit on-street parking on both sides of the street. So people routinely park on the sidewalk on the south side of the street. It's very difficult to turn around. There's no provision for any sort of turnaround at the end of the street. There's a gate blocked at Jackson Brewery that encroaches at least 50 feet onto the public right-of-way. And I just want Sugar Creek to give some careful attention to the overall planning and circulation of the neighborhood and what they're proposing to do. My understanding is that they intend to renovate the Jackson Brewery as a boutique hotel and the Cliffside Brewery as an event center. And surely those uses, in addition to the manufacturing of the beer, are going to create a need for parking. And we've already have a very, very limited amount of on-street parking on Mohawk Street. And I just want to see a more comprehensive view of what's going to happen here, rather than just trying to get approval for a little bit here, a little bit here, a little bit here. And then by the time you get to a comprehensive plan, you've eliminated many possibilities that might be available. So those are my concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Mr. Bob Kresge. Sorry if I've butchered your last name. If you would like to speak, please unmute and we'll get you sworn in.
I had no input on it. I haven't been able to see drawings for this. I was just trying to reach out to understand what was going on in the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant or owner like to respond in any way to Mr. Dellinger's comments?
Well, I mean, can you hear me? Did you, okay. I don't know if I need to be sworn in. I didn't have a comment, but.
Yes.
Sure, yeah, you do. Can you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear the testimony you shall give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. I appreciate Denny's concerns. I mean, we'd like to know what we're going to be doing with Jackson Brewery now too. Understand the constraints on Mohawk. We just, boutique hotel was initial. We have no idea what that Jackson's going to be. We're in the process of getting it stabilized, should be stabilized by the end of May. trying to working with the city on some paper streets and some park property to be able to gain access off of McMicken for Jackson. So really right now we don't know what we're doing with Jackson right now. So if we could offer them up a full site plan of all the buildings that we own, we would, but we don't have it yet.
Any additional questions or comments from the board?
I'd like to ask Mr. Owens to address Mr. Dillinger's concerns.
So, I mean, it's hard for me to address just because we don't have plans for what is happening down the road. You know, I'm reviewing the applications that are coming to me for this Felsenbrow and Cliffside Brewing project. But, you know, my review is really limited to what happens on the private property. So, you know, if there are traffic issues on Mohawk or sidewalk issues or things along those lines, those are outside the boundaries of my approvals. Any public infrastructure improvements are exempt from the COA requirements, and those would just have to go through the regular DOTE process and that kind of thing. So, you know, I understand where he's coming from, and I understand his concerns on the parking lot as it was presented with this project initially. So I will certainly keep those concerns in mind going forward with future phases of this work.
But Mr. Giles, are you involved in any of the other properties? I'm not sure I caught all that. Can you hear that?
Me?
Yes.
Gillis?
Patrick?
Yeah.
Gillis, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm involved in all of them.
All of them. Oh, okay.
The Felsen House, Cliffside, and stabilization of Jackson.
This is Ron Novak with Drawing Department, and I will tell you that, you know, we've worked in and around these properties for the last 10 years or so. And, you know, I think that our ownership of these properties, Sugar Creek, understands sort of the responsibility of the properties that they've taken. And while they try to figure out what the master plan is for the area and being a good steward of the neighborhood, they're going to leverage that against creating a responsible property. So we don't have all of that set in stone today. And, you know, it's in an overlay district that doesn't have specific requirements necessarily for parking. But ever since we set foot on this property at Cliffside and Felsen House, whether it was an event space back in the day or it was a brewery or whatever it was, we've always taken the responsibility of parking very seriously. So it'll just be a part of the process that we engage in to figure that out along the way. But, you know, Sugar Creek represents somebody different that's not been able to do what they're able to do in the neighborhood with the collection of properties they have. So I think it's a more holistic response that Denny is talking about. I think that will happen through the natural discourse of design that's going to happen across the area with their properties.
Any further questions?
You know, so I'm sorry, Madam Chair. So I guess what I'm assuming, and you know what they say about that there's going to be in the future some commitment with the owners to collaborate with the people on Mohawk, because it is kind of a tight area up there and you've got so much going on. I realize you only know what you know when you learn it. But it would be good to hear just a commitment from your part that will happen. The collaboration. That's all I have.
Yes. From Sugar Creek, yes, we will collaborate with the designer master plan with Mohawk residents.
Okay. Are there any further questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll approve or recommend we approve the certificate of appropriateness for 242 West McMicken as identified in staff's report.
I think that needs to be amended to reflect the changes with the parking since the report was issued. Am I correct on that?
That's correct. And Doug, if you could clarify, you're recommending approval of the COA and recommending approval for the zoning relief, the conditional use production facility,
Correct.
and you are asking us to table the approval on the special exception for the landscape buffering for the parking area.
Correct.
So we'll need something along those lines.
Would you mind amending your motion?
We'll have to remember all that. So yes, that pending the approval of the special exception for the parking. I'm not sure. How do I want to say this, David?
Yeah, sorry. If you want to make a motion to approve what Doug has just recommended, you would be asking for approval or a motion to approve the conditional use for a general production use and a motion to approve the COA as recommended by staff. I think the third part of that would be a motion to table the special exception.
So we want to recommend approval of the certificate of appropriateness for. Well, let me do it this way. Recorder, can you reiterate what Mr. Sturkey just said there? Read that back.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
1 second.
I know I'm cheating.
Yeah, hold on, I'm looking it up. So can you hear me?
Yes.
If you want to make a motion to approve what Doug has just recommended, you will be asking for a motion to approve the conditional use for the general production use and a motion to approve the COA as recommended by staff. I think, and I'm sorry, the third part of that.
And to
would
table.
be, yes.
And to table approval of the parking lot. So moved.
I'll second that.
Okay, I will call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Thank you. Looks like you can move forward. I think the last item on the agenda is the delegation memo. Would you like to speak about that, Doug?
This is the reapproval of the memorandum that gives Doug the authority to approve at a staff level the de minimis alterations.
I move that we approve.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, so we've got a motion and a second. I'll call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Great. I think we're in good shape there. So I think the remaining item is adjournment. Is that correct?
No,
We
we have
also
COA
have-
approvals.
Oh, sorry. Jumped the gun on that one. It's been a few days since I reviewed them. Okay, any questions on the COA approvals?
I did have one, Madam Chair. Mr. Owen, on 1005 Walnut Street, I understand it's an incompatible building. The area where that duct, if I'm understanding properly, where that ductwork is coming up, theoretically, I understand that they're intending to paint it to match the mural. What was the thinking on that? Bringing ductwork up seems like a fairly impactful thing to do.
So I was just curious about what your thought process was on that. Was there no other option?
Right, yes, I spoke with the applicants on this, and because of the way the building is configured, it's a little bit odd because the restaurant access will be from the rear of the building, which has that kind of plaza courtyard area now that is accessed from Court Street. So the restaurant is at the rear of the building, which means their kitchen and mechanical equipment and things along those lines are on the front side of the building along Walnut. So yes, that venting and duct work, the only feasible way for them to get that out without running up the front of the building was to place that on the side. So being a non-contributing building or incompatible building, or however it's defined in the district guidelines, that combined with the fact that it would be painted to match the mural behind it, I felt that was the most appropriate way to deal with that scenario.
Okay, well, this is not the hill on which I would choose to die, but not super excited about ductwork being exposed there. But that was my only question on that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any additional questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
So moved. So I moved to approve the staff approvals.
Thank you.
Second.
I will call the roll. Ms. Smith,
Yes.
Mr. Weiss,
Yes.
Mr. Zelasco,
Aye.
Mr. Sunderman,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Mr. Young,
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. Okay, now I think the last thing on the agenda is adjournment.
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
great week.
Thanks.